Welcome back. Today I'm going to be reading the rest of the book to you. I've decided I'm just going to go ahead and read the last 3 chapters together, and that way we'll be finished up and discussing it and doing a few activities. So today we're going to be looking at chapters 29, 30, and 31. And chapter 29 is from Hugh Winkleman's perspective. So grab your book, turn to page 189 with me, and let's take a listen to what happens. Remember last time we left off, Cap and Sophie had arrived at the dance, and the people were jam-packed in the parking lot, not inside at a dance, and candles were lit and the Beatles songs were playing. So let's take a listen to what happens. Chapter 29, Hugh Winkleman. In the great encyclopedia of history, if you look up mass stupidity, this was the picture you'd see. 1,100 kids dressed as hippies, crammed belly to belly in a parking lot, having a candlelight memorial for someone who was probably just fine. The idea to dress as Cap hadn't been part of Zach's original plan. Maybe it was the Halloween spirit, but word had started spreading almost as soon as Zach and I had begun passing the flyers around the school. Picture it. The entire student body decked out in day glow and beads, all except for one brain-dead pair wearing Mickey Mouse masks. The candles had been Zach's idea. "We'll need the light," he told me on the way to the dollar store. But their effect was more than either of us could have imagined. Hundreds of tiny flames glowing orange in the dark just screamed morning. Dull, flickering shadows reflected off somber faces. Eerie. Zach, I'd almost spent my whole life, most of my life, either afraid of him, jealous of him, or just hanging there while he stretched the waistband of my underwear over a parking meter. We were never going to be best friends, but I had to admire the guy. He was a genius. Not book smart, but a master when it came to crafting his public image. Somehow, he had positioned himself as head mourner of the Anderson tragedy. Not bad, considering that a couple of days ago, he was the villain of the school, him and me. Okay, we deserved that. Setting Cap up at the pep rally was an awful thing to do, and I felt terrible about my part in it. Being angry at Cap was no excuse. I knew better than anyone what it was like to be a target for the Zachs of this world. A lot more than just my conscience was suffering. I was kicked out of the chess club for good. I had a month of detentions and a black mark on my permanent record. And how's this for ironic? The only way to avoid being branded Cap's backstabber was to get myself embroiled in yet another scheme with the same Zach Powers. Beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life on this planet. I approached Zach. So now what? We're not just going to stand around all night, are we? Chill, he said serenely, jiggling his Dixie cup to keep his candle from going out. We're basking in our sorrow. I was uneasy. I don't know. A third of these kids are positive Cap's dead. A third of them have him in intensive care, and the rest are just here because everyone else is. The last thing we want to do is give people too much time to think. Good point, Zach agreed. He hoisted himself onto the payload of the school district's flatbed truck and stopped the tape on the boombox, which was playing Here Comes the Sun. He took the karaoke mic and flipped the switch. Attention, everybody. Can I have your attention up here? Considering the size of the crowd, we were a quiet group, gathered in clusters, speaking in hushed tones, almost like this really was a funeral. It only took a few seconds before all eyes were on Zach. Thanks for coming. I know if Cap could be here, he'd thank you too. Cap Anderson was our 8th grade president for just 2 months. 2 wild, fantastic months. Now he's gone. And the best way to celebrate his life is to talk about the way he touched our lives. Then, before my amazed eyes, people began to push forward through the crowd and mount the flatbed, awaiting their turn at the microphone. Naomi got there first. I wasn't a nice person, she announced. I was mean to Cap because I thought it would get me what I wanted. Then I started watching him. He showed me a whole different way to be. How to be sensitive and generous, and not just so people will say thank you, but because it's right. She drew in a tremulous breath. I I never even had a chance to tell him there's no Lorelai Lumley. Overcome, she gave up the mic to the 7th grader beside her. I used to be really shy. I didn't have any friends, he confessed. Then Cap let me work on the Halloween dance. I was blown away. One after another, these kids took center stage and poured their hearts out about how Cap had changed their lives. His Tai Chi class helped me lose 11 pounds. I stopped picking on my little brother. I started giving some of my paper route money to charity. Learning about the 60s helped me get along better with my grandparents. My mind was in a whirl. The kids at Sea Average wouldn't share their innermost feelings if you held a machete to their throats. We lived in constant terror of letting slip some personal or embarrassing detail. We went to incredible lengths to avoid looking vulnerable or uncool. Yet, here they were, lined up to spill their guts like this was an episode of Dr. Phil. Because Cap had made everything A-OK. Well, I was the #1 victim around here, and suddenly, right in front of me was a golden opportunity to paint myself with the Cap Anderson brush that would make me A-OK too. I just had to get up there in front of the entire student body and join the fan club. As I climbed onto the flatbed, I got my first sense of just how big this event had become. I knew the whole school was here, but now adults were starting to gather around the perimeter, the neighbors probably, and passers-by. Oh no, it was Mr. Kasigi. I had to say my piece before our assistant principal shut down the whole thing. I grabbed the microphone from a 6th grade girl who insisted that Tai Chi had made her unbeatable at gymnastics. My name is Hugh Winkleman, and I was Cap's first friend at school. I experienced a brief moment of panic. I'd been so intent on getting the floor that I hadn't given a thought to what I would say. 1,100 faces peered earnestly up at me. This was no time to be timid. If I was going to do this, I had to let it all hang out. I bit down hard on the side of my mouth until I felt 2 giant tears well out of my eyes and roll down my cheeks. Cap Anderson was the greatest person it's ever been my honor to know. How are we ever going to get along without our president? I could see Mr. Kasigi pushing through the crowd. It was time to give this a big finish. This was my shining hour. Hugh Winkleman would be the school joke no longer. I dropped the mic to the flatbed, raised both arms to the heavens, and howled, "Cap, you were too young to die!" I could hear sobs breaking out all around me, and then a muffled but strangely familiar voice called, "Hugh, don't cry!" I goggled. One of the kids in the Mickey Mouse masks waded through the crush to reach the truck. He stopped just below me and pulled off the mouse head. "See?" announced Cap Anderson. "Everything's okay. I'm not dead." Chapter 30 is next.